Boom. I still don't have intro music, evidently. Obviously. Let me just fix my mic for a second. Boom. Still no intro music. I need help. Help me find the right intro music. This is the second episode of the YamatoCannon experience, where we will just talk League and whatever we want. My guest couldn't make it for this one, but I needed to get it out because, last week I had food poisoning. Last week I had food poisoning, and that was a bitch. Food poisoning was very rough. It was one of the roughest one I've had. Like, you guys know that there's like levels to it. And the pain was like gut wrenching. And at this point in time, it's whenever I look at food, I feel like my stomach is communicating with me. It's with fear. My stomach is scared of eating anything because it's the second food poisoning I've had in very close proximity. It was this, we were supposed to go to Subway because Verius doesn't like spicy food too much. So I was like, all right, let's go Subway. And then we didn't have that much time. And then we checked the Subway line, and it was just, it was as if people were queuing up and it was pretzel day at the office. It was the longest line I've ever seen. I think everyone was serving spicy food on that day. So we were like, I didn't know what to do. And Verius was like, I know this secret place, this secret chicken sandwich place. And I was like, okay, cool. I begin to imagine it. When you think of food, you like to imagine it. You want to like prepare yourself to eat it. And I was imagining like this gourmet sandwich where, like some hipster that would work like at a coffee shop that does like coffee. He has like a ponytail and talks like this, dude. I was thinking the sandwich with like bio vegetables and like everything near grown and all of that jazz. And then it begins to tell me the story of this owner. And apparently he always smells like alcohol. And then that image of the hipster doing the shit out of my sandwich just disappears. We approach this shack that stood the test of time, honestly. This shack, I wouldn't be surprised if it stood there back in World War II, man. This shack. We went up to it, and the price is usually a big a red flag, a big red flag. When you I checked the price, and it's like €2 for a chicken sandwich. There's no way in hell this chicken's gonna be good quality, But I'm like, okay, screw it. Maybe it's good, I'm hungry. Usually, like before these two food poisonings, I didn't give a shit. I just ate kind of everything, and we went for it. I took two because I'm a big guy, I took two sandwiches, and something was off. The people serving it was kind of like, they were kind of like, you could see that they kind of hate their job. They didn't want to be there. No love. I think food really needs love, and grab the sandwiches, and it said chicken fillet, but that was not chicken fillet. That was something completely different. And then they had like condiments. They had mayo, ketchup, mustard, whatever. Took some condiments, said thank you. They just looked at me, like the woman working at the shack. She was like scratching her face warts. It's kind of unappetizing, but like, screw it, Ate those chicken sandwiches. They're all right, for the price. They're all right. I'm not gonna complain about the flavor, but you kind of knew that something was off, It's like this shack would not pass any health inspection. This shack puts shame on Shaquille O'Neal because his name is somehow associated with this shack. This was a terrible shack. Nevertheless, ate the sandwich, both of them, devoured them. Ate some of the spicy food too. Screw it. I went back home. Was supposed to go to like a Red Bull event, but I felt like something was off already. And then I did the worst thing ever. I just ate a shrimp salad as well. So I just like checked all the marks for like food poisoning. So I don't know what it was, but in the end, I was doomed. It was one of those food poisonings when, I could sleep like in periods of 15 minutes. And like I was just, at one point, I found solitude with my head on the toilet rest. It was really, really rough, but I'm good now. I'm just talking about this because this is why I missed the previous episode. The previous episode was just was gone. I don't want to make this a consistent thing. I know people ask for video, but they'll have to wait until we have a guest. I think it makes more sense. For now, just enjoy this picture of me on my first day at work at the LEC. Drinking water. Trevor will be very happy about that because I have the logo facing outwards, the LEC logo, the crown. Wearing my Fox socks for our boy Fox Drop. No, I'm kidding. I like foxes regardless. But sure, let's say it's an homage to Mr. Foxdrop. So League of Legends has been busy. League of Legends has been very busy. You guys have been hearing me ranting about Sena for the longest time ever, and the LCK has very low priority on Sena, which is interesting. But I think the reasoning behind it is most of the games that are happening in the LCK is very centered around bottom and snowballing bottom, and Senna does this too slow. Even though Senna can be very strong at every point of the game, snowballing wise, it's not that impactful. Misfortune can rotate faster, Felix can snowball faster, and can be very impactful if he's ahead in fights. Senna is more like consistently strong and more maybe better as a safe side option. We saw a lot of Misfortune being used properly. I did the segment where I think there are picks that people should drop. I put Misfortune as one because I didn't see any team in the LEC actually use it properly. Misfortune, in order for her to be fully effective, you need to use the fact that she's so powerful in the early game. And as we can see, the LCK, Misfortune is being used to get the first Drake, to get the first Rift Herald, and then set up, and then most of the time, a lot of the games that we are seeing in the LCK are games that either reach 4 Drakes and the team that just had early game control keep taking them, because I feel like the LCK teams are waiting for like a miracle mistake to happen instead of pressuring the enemy to make a mistake. They are respecting the enemy very, very much and not trying to find patterns or ways in order to break the enemy. And then sometimes, occasionally, you have fights that happen. A lot of early ganks on top, maybe from like the first level 3 gank on top to make the matchup snowball. Whether it's Sett or Mordekaiser, it's always quite impactful. Later on, it becomes more and more difficult to gank it. And then just heavy Drake-centered gameplay. So I think the reasoning still, plain and simple, Senna is not that big of a snowballer. Next thing in line is Soraka top. Like for those that missed it, if you were under a rock and you didn't miss Soraka, or you missed Soraka, it's very fun to play. The whole reason of Soraka is that obviously as a support, she's not designed to have that much gold. Just drinking some water. Splash. She is designed to be a support with less gold, and she scales absurdly well with items, especially Athene's. Athene's is perfect because it just turbocharges her ultimate, and the whole idea of Soraka is that you don't necessarily want to win lane, you don't care about lane, even if you're behind, you are ahead, because of the nature of the champ, as I mentioned before. The ultimate is so ungodly powerful. The numbers are very, very high. Also, when you reach level 6 so early in the game in comparison to bottom, which is around 9-10 minute mark. Top lane, you reach it around 6-7. The ultimate comes online earlier, and it's also going to win you that 2v2 on bottom side. So if you're in a position where you're forcing hard on bottom, Soraka ults is going to change any kind of 2v2, 3v3 unless the enemy is super, super far ahead. And the same thing applies for mid lane. So basically, Soraka, you give her space early game so she doesn't get killed. Her 2v2 is not that weak early levels from 1 to 3 or maybe 1 to 5. Then later on, you use her ultimate as a global power to win 2v2 mid, win 3v3 on bottom, and then you force through it. And you just make sure that Soraka is your safe side, and Soraka's ultimate is just powerful enough to win you any fights. The way you should attack it, which I haven't seen yet, which is surprising. I still want to see how Soraka manages to play against like an Elise and a Kled. What's going to happen? Because we've seen a lot of Soraka blind picks, and in a lot of cases we see Soraka as a counter pick as well, like into Ornn or into something that is predictable, like the easier matchups that don't have the heaviest all-in. Like for example in Aatrox, he has a good all-in, but it's not like as heavy-handed as like a Kled or an Aurelia or a Jace. So I want to see how Soraka survives that, because I just struggle to imagine that. Elise Kled, imagine you just dive Soraka over and over. She has to use her ult to maybe survive the ganks and the dive, and then all of a sudden she just does nothing, and the Kled is 5-0, right? So I think there's definitely room for that. Sona would be a bit more durable against this, because Sona can, of course, just roam. You play buy the support item, get your shot, and then you just roam with the absurd move speed you get from your E. So that's like believable. Soraka's impact is through ult. Her roaming is not the greatest, right? Because she's not so quick unless your teammates are very low HP. So I think Sona can be more durable in those cases where you get dove over and over, and you just sacrifice top in order to gain something mid or bottom. So I have my reservations in terms of Soraka, but I think it's very unhealthy for the game, because top lane was for the first time in a very healthy state, honestly. Top lane is such a disaster to balance, because it is the epitome of rock, paper, scissors. Rock, paper, scissors in the sense that you can always pick some deep counter, but that deep counter is always countered by jungle presence. Most 1v1 matchups, obviously, if you get ganked, is going to be decided by the jungler. It's going to be decided by the flow of the game. Sometimes the enemy top lane TP's bottom, gets a triple kill, and that happens too. You lose the game. There's a lot of outside factors that will impact you in top. And for the first time now, it's I think a meta where it is bot heavy in the early game is healthy for top lane. If a jungler goes top and camps top, it is just too oppressive for top laners, because it is very, very hard to recover. But of course, there are situations where you're forced to be 2 on top side and so forth. I know there are situations where if your jungle cooperates, then top lane is indeed a lot of fun and it's exciting. But my main initial point that I said was that I actually like the top lane meta right now, because we have like Sett, we have some Mordekaiser, Ornn, Aatrox, Cannon is showing up, a variety of champions, a variety of damage mixes, and champions that have clear strengths and clear weaknesses, and not just oppression in the shape of kleptomancy. I think kleptomancy really made top lane disgusting. Like with the Jace, with the Cannon, with the Vladimir, Nuguri got pretty nerfed in the off season. Because I think this is the main complaint for a lot of top laners, is just the ranged champions that can dominate the matchup naturally. If they can play aggressive, they're going to dominate. And then if they get ganked, they fall off. Because even now, you can go very, very deep into the counter pick space, right? You can go Draven top and you can win your matchup, but if you get ganked, you're going to be in trouble. So always every matchup in top lane is at the mercy of jungle. And now, in the first time in forever, honestly, we have like a healthy mix of champions in the top lane, and Soraka. Even though I think there is counterplay to it, that teams haven't explored enough, I think it is good to just gut it and remove it. But I'm not sure if the presented nerf, 60% less damage on creeps on Q, is a big enough nerf for it to suffice to remove Soraka from the picture, because she is S plus now. She's like super strong, and it's just great. We saw Soraka against Rumble. Soraka against Rumble, I think, is a weak pick. Like as I said, Soraka always wants to buy Athene, so if you have physical damage, you're good. If you have grievous wounds naturally in your kit, then it's also good. That's why Kled, I think, is just a perfect match. All in, grievous wounds, physical damage, mix it together with an Elise or Sejuani, and you're going to go ballistic. But I think, to summarize the top lane conversation, I think top lane is an unsolvable puzzle. If you want to make everyone happy, that's just unsolvable. Because the way top lane works is the extreme version of rock, paper, scissors. And we are at a point in time where people don't have any inhibitions in regards to what they can play in top or not. There is no like, oh, you can't play the AD carry in the top lane. You can't play mages in the top lane. There is no conversation like this. And now the last door has been opened. You can play support in the top lane. So now it's wide open. You can always find a deeper counter pick, and then that counter pick will always be, not always, but in some cases, be countered by ganks. So if you're blind picking top, you're at the mercy of your own jungler and the enemy in regards to how hard they want to counter pick you. And then the champions that can be blind picked and don't have counters are usually just OP. That's the thing. If there's a champion you can blind pick top, usually it is just too OP. And now, in the most recent years, you've had double flexes come in to solve top lane matchups where, for example, let's say enemy show Rumble, then you pick two champions that can go both mid and top, and you make sure that you have champions that are good into Rumble. Which is, when I say champions that can go mid and top, right now no one gives a shit. Everyone sends everything mid, everything top as well. So everyone's very open-minded to it, and most mid laners have to learn how to play Ornn, have to learn how to play a Mordekaiser or something like this, right? It becomes the true meaning of solo lane instead of just top and mid separately. It's just the geographical change. So there are ways to solve top and to attack top, but usually those double flexes are also regarded as very, very OP. Like Akali gets banned a lot, Rumble gets banned a lot. Ornn, I don't think is being utilized enough, but Ornn doesn't necessarily have like great matchups in mids or top lane. Mordecai is a flex as well, right? So there are definitely top laners and like flex picks that stand out there that make it easy to pick top. But usually, if you have something that can be blind pick top and be good into every matchup, it's just plain OP. The best example is, for example, past Camille or Akali. In our case, in the current day and age, before this 10.3 patch. So top lane is just whenever you find that ideal pick, it just means that it's OP. And top lane is rock paper scissors. You're at the mercy of your jungle. It is an unsolvable position. I think the best way is just to accept that, you give power to the Drakes and then isolate top lane as much as possible so junglers don't spend time interacting with it and make it into a 1v1 city. Just make it into a 1v1 arena where no one can enter for the longest time ever. But even that poses issues, right? We're going to have like the most deepest 1v1 champions like Draven be picked in the top lane. So it's also not a solution. And that's my point, right? There is no solution to this issue. Sett is an interesting pickle. Sett, we saw some blind picks, very high prior in Korea. I think rightfully so. A lot of people think Sett is counterable, which I think that's fair. You can definitely kite Sett, and he has some mobility issues. He reminds me a lot of what Darius was in 2015 World Championship when he got reworked to become a juggernaut. Back then, Darius was also getting kited like a dog, but his numbers were just so absurd that it didn't matter. If Sett latches onto something, which in most games will happen, then it's just too impactful. and that's the whole idea of Sett. We also saw some Sett mid lane as well with Aftershock. Conqueror is also super OP. The numbers of Sett is just too high, and on live he's very nerfed. I think the cooldown nerf is pretty huge, but all in all, I think. Oops, I moved myself. Let me find the center again. All in all, I think Sett is very strong, and I agree with the prio that is happening in the LCK. There are ways to deal with them. I don't think Sett is necessarily the best laner. You can snowball onto him early, and like for example, an Aatrox can gain advantage, or a Mordekaiser can gain advantage. But the numbers are quite absurd. That's just a fact. Sett now on live with the nerf on 4-second cooldown W. It's really big because W is your bread and butter. You know, it's your survivability, it's your damage. And usually, I think most fights are decided if Sett can get 2 Ws off. And this makes that window so much bigger where he can't. So I think the nerf on live is super huge. It's a very big nerf. Aphelios, you know, it's still. I agree with the notion that it's very difficult to see what is coming at you. I think some of the colors are very similar, like the gravity cannon and the flamethrower. I think looks very similar. I don't know if I'm just being blind. It's like a shade of purple, and it's hard to judge what Aphelios is doing most of the time. I think it has gotten easier with time. Usually, you know, if he has the white weapon, I want to bail. I understand now the sequence of which weapons are coming. If he is finding a next weapon and so forth, I understand that better. So of course, playing against Aphelios helps. I should probably play Aphelios to understand it better. But I think Aphelios, even through the nerf on 10.2, looks pretty busted. It's I always had the idea in my mind, especially when we saw Aphelios in the first LPL weeks, that we don't have a good Aphelios player yet. There's no one out there that has like mastered it to the max. And I think there is a lot of skill expression in Aphelios. And when that becomes the standard, I think Aphelios is going to get gutted even more. Because it's definitely one of those champions that the community needs to learn how to use. It was the same with Akali, right? Akali has gone through so many nerfs, and at this point in time, 2020, 7th of February, now we have fantastic Akali players, right? Everyone has figured out all the mechanics, everything is a basic mechanic. But, you know, when Akali was released and when she was at her strongest, people just didn't know how to use her. People didn't know how to trade level 1, people didn't know how to trade level 2. People were just kind of eating poke and then waiting for level 6 and then all aiming at level 6. Akali has been nerfed, I don't know, countless amount of times the last days. And the last days, I mean, ever since her rework. And it is another one of those things where the community needs to learn how to handle the champ. And as the community got better, the champion looked more and more OP. Just think about the mechanics that this champion had on release. When you queued, when you were over a certain point of energy, you got healing, you got healed. Your W made you invisible from turrets. What the hell? R cooldown was much lower. First R had a mini stun. It was unbelievably OP if you look back at it, but everyone was worse. I think the same thing is happening with Aphelios. As people going to get better, it's going to get more gutted. I think this champion has so much power, so much power. And the reason why I think Sona was just prioritized higher was because Sona is so much easier to master for a community, right? Usually, if you have one Aphelios player that is really insane, that becomes the new standard and everyone learns from him, right? The one tricks usually pave the way for how we are supposed to play champions. LCK so far has been good. Some complaints about, game speed I read, but I think game speed in general all over the world is kind of wonky. I think the issue, if anything, with the LCK, I think they are not ever taking any risks that stand out. I think they have a very clear grasp of the strengths and the weaknesses within the game, and they are almost too logical about it. Because I think on paper, when teams are weaker, they are giving up a lot, and there is no like end game insight where your percentages will diminish with time as the enemy gets more and more objectives. I think I saw too many games where LCK teams kind of fold over after that first initial play. Let's say a team gets first blood, and that leads into a Drake, and then with that first blood, they push bottom, get Prio, Rift Herald, and so forth, take first turret, and they continue down this line. After that, LCK teams need to find ways to break that pattern. Is there a goal in mind? Is there a specific spike? Is there a specific situation? What can they create out of nothing? While on paper the enemy is winning, what can we do in order to break the mold? And there has been games where teams have been relatively even, and I think those are the most exciting games. But there's been games where teams kind of fold. So I think that distinction, these games, and that weakness seems to be the same old LCK trend. DRX are playing right now. I saw their first game. I saw the Ziggs. I've been talking about the Ziggs now for 2 weeks about how it can be strong in the bot lane, but I saw that they lost the first game. Deft is probably the last player I would want to put on Ziggs, because I think you guys know my opinion on Deft. I think he's one of the best ADCs in the world, and I think Ziggs is, you put him on Ziggs, it means that he's going to be in the backpack. He's at the mercy of his team, and I think also Chovy on top playing Sett was kind of strange, but I wouldn't say that I know too much about quad, so I don't know what's going on there. I didn't watch the game in its entirety. But it's okay in general. I think the level is good. The eye for early game is very strong. I think the early games are definitely looking better than the LCS and the LEC. I think the early game is looking very good. I was very surprised by Griffin. Like Tarzan level is kind of looking rough. So his recent performance was kind of disappointing. Was hoping for more. Very surprised that Tarzan even stayed in this team. That was rough as well. In the sense, of course, the Griffin drama and all. It's kind of awful. And then there was also SKT with Roach. Roach was struggling. Not a big fan of Roach, honestly. It's weird now because the reputation with SKT is that no one wants to join the team. And then now Kim has, their coach, has a history of working with top laners and making them into absolute monsters. Working with Deshai and Nuguri, and now with, of course, SK Telecom Roach. But we'll have to give it time. We'll have to give it time. Always when SKT, you count them out, this is where they turn into the strongest. Katie has been a pleasant surprise, honestly. Katie showed us some fine games. Afrika also looks pretty decent. Spirits looks pretty insane, honestly. Fly looks better. Like it's weird because a lot of people are called Fly, so I'm confusing all of them. So I don't want to like tie history in the wrong way, because I think the current Fly of Afrika had a good performance, and I'm pretty hyped on Mystic as well. So Afrika looks pretty strong. DRX, I don't know what to think about them because they just lost one game. Griffin looks pretty weak, honestly. I think Genji looked alright as well. I'm trying to remember the last team. There's a team that I'm forgetting. Let me just open this little website. Sandbox Gaming, also, to be fair, played against APK Prince, so it's hard to judge. It's very hard to judge. Actually, KT lost against SK Telecom. Why am I hyping KT? KT lost. Nevertheless, LCK, not my main region, but it is, of course, fun to follow. My main focus will still be LEC. I'm using more the LCK for draft references and play references. I think still what stands out to me is the lack of risk-taking in the LCK to break the pattern. And I think this is always what makes it easier for G2 and European teams to face the Korean teams. Because even though the LCK teams are very, very stern, disciplined, which is a massive strength, there is a line of predictability. Predictability can be good, right? Especially early on in the season. Early on in the season, there's a lot of undisciplined mistakes that are happening from even the best of the best. And with that in mind, it's just a question of long term, taking those bets rather sooner than later, because your odds diminish with time. I think this has always been an issue for LCK teams. So we'll have to see how it progresses. I'm excited. It's fun to have LCK start. As a fan, I love the LCK. I'm super hyped about Afrika, Sandbox, and Genji. Forget about KT. Dragon X, will have to see how they figured it out after, of course, the first game that they lost. Hanwha Life was a pleasant surprise as well. They had some cool drafts against SKT. Cool, you get to judge it however you want with the goddamn Yumi and the Olaf and the Soraka top against the Aatrox. It was interesting to say the least. I respect it. They won the game, so it works, right? Kuve is weird because I feel like there's been moments where he's been the best top laner, and then there's been moments where he's the worst top laner. So it's always very hard to judge the man. I guess we move on to the LPL. The LPL suspended still. I'm worried at this point what is going to happen with the whole MSI business. Are they just going to smash the amount of games they need to play? Are the LPL teams... excuse me. Yawn. Are the LPL teams just gonna get worse, or are they going to get better because they have no sense of like they don't need to go outside, or they can't go outside? They just need to stay at home, right, and chill. So it's are they just playing League all day and like turning Super Saiyan or something? Who knows? It's weird. But like, are they scrimming? I imagine they must be scrimming, right? Like, I don't know what's going to happen if they are so damn late on schedule that they just didn't finish by the time MSI starts. What is going to happen? No idea. They just come together and send the best teams. Like, oh, these guys are really good. Let's send them and let's hope they win. It would be interesting. Yeah, I miss the LPL, man. I just want to see the continuation of IG, of E-Star. I want to see if FPX bounce back. There's a lot of question marks. RNG with Betty. Betty's a strong player. I wonder if it's an honor or a boon to be the bench of UZI. because everyone knows he's gonna come back. You're not gonna outperform Uzi, right? It's not gonna happen. So I don't know. I want to see some Mata coaching in action. Nevertheless, I think that's everything that can be said on of course, the goddamn LPL. Now for the tier list of LEC, we are going to update that every week, like the tier list of teams. First place G2, naturally, they haven't dropped a single game. They look better and better week by week. Week 2, they improved on the early game. They actually had an early game, that's a big improvement. First game against Vitality was very easy. They had Lucian and the Yasuo matchup, and Perks executed on that perfectly, and Saken doesn't know how to play the matchup too well or find opportunities to break it. And then they had the unofficial pentakill on bottom, so yada yada yada. And then the game against OG, I think they definitely outdrafted Soraka. I think Origin picking Rumble into it was a mistake. I understand that they are looking to pick AP because they have Rek'Sai and Silas and Zaya on bottom, but who's going to buy armor on the enemy team? Soraka's naturally going to buy Athenes. I think this was an opportunity to try something different and something like with a bit more punch. G2 took the game away. They almost threw it because they gave a Baron away, but the gold lead was very deceptive. The gold lead was very deceptive, and the gold lead was deceptive because Soraka didn't take any CS. She was very behind on CS, very behind on gold, but Soraka didn't give a shit because Soraka had 2 items, so she was ready for the late game. And LeBlanc, even though G2 was like ahead 3k, LeBlanc was ahead maybe 5k. Silas was an interesting one because I think Silas has a lot of room to be played, but he needs to, play so aggro. He needs to put his face on the keyboard, that level of aggro, because the sustain is in the shape of a gap close he needs to use on enemy champions. So if he doesn't get to use that, he's doomed, and eventually G2 got the upper hand in the early game. Very, very good gameplay from G2, honestly, besides the Nanash where LeBlanc gets caught and they all get rumble ulted. Second place for me is Fnatic. Even though they lost against OG, I think Fnatic, when they take leads, they devour their enemies. Their strength of schedule hasn't been the strongest, but I think Fnatic is still the second best team. I think if there was a rematch between Fnatic and OG, I think Fnatic would outpace OG. I think the loss against OG was just because of the draft. They just couldn't do anything with their draft, and of course the Swain pick was just it's very bad. So I think we blame Mithy for that one. Origin third place. They beat Rogue, so naturally they're third place. Origin will be the benchmark. I think OG will always hover below Fnatic and G2. I don't know what the odds of them breaking top 2 are. I think it's very slim. I think Destiny did show against G2 that he was quite exposed. He was way outside of his depth, and he had a very, very rough game against G2. And I think in previous games, for example, against Fnatic, he played Rakan into Braum Aphelios, which is a very easy matchup for Rakan. There's very little room for mistakes. And Hillisan was honestly, we lost this Hillisan coin flip there, and he was not performing so well in the match. So I don't know. I'm not so sold on Destiny train. I think he's still the weak point of Origin. Rogue fourth place. So I think they are very, very stable and solid team, but I think they're kind of Origin light. I don't think they're going to do anything out of the ordinary to break the mold of what the game is. I don't think they are the team to take the big risks in order to shift the game, to beat anyone above them. I think they will consistently beat the teams below them, but the games against the teams above them will look very rough, because I think they are too reliant on getting leads, and sometimes you need to have a bit of explosiveness. There was a reason why the top teams were afraid of the Vitality version we had, was because we were willing to take risks and we were willing to be very explosive. And that's something that you need to find as a balance. Obviously, that explosiveness backfired a lot, right? But the threat of it still matters. And I think when you're playing against teams that are on paper better than you, then you need to have some dynamite packed in your pockets, you know? And then you need to strap yourself in, and then you need to hug your enemy and then just take them for a ride, you know? And then there is the advantage of you knowing that you have dynamite strapped to yourself and them not knowing and them just feeling uncomfortable while you hug them, right? There is power in that agency, a lot of power in that agency. So I think Rogue's still biggest weakness together with Origin is that I don't see anything out of the ordinary for them to break the mold of the game. While I think Origin is much better than Rogue at this, because they did show us a lot of sign of life. Like in the game against G2, they did in fact do super well in the game to hang on for so long. Excel is my fifth place. This is where it becomes a bit foggy. Excel, I think they showed a lot of strength in the early game. I think they showed a lot of life in the early game. And this is the type of early game that could potentially find a victory against a G2 or Fnatic if they know how to transfer that lead. That has been a big struggle for Excel. They managed to do it this weekend. Mickey got that double kill against Mad Lions and they stomped. Excel still, I don't think they're going to beat anyone in the top four. I don't think they have that level of consistency when it comes to the mid to late game to really shut it down. But I think these are things that can be easily taught, and my impression is that Excel has one of the best atmospheres to be in, as the players don't have too big of egos. And I think their mid game to late game can definitely be solved. The worry about this team is you don't have like crazy star power here, but always before players become superstars and those level of players that can take wins for you, right? They are players that just don't. So we just have to wait patiently. But Excel for me is the fifth place team. Sixth place is a bit more difficult, but I put Mad Lions. The reason I say it's difficult is because I think Misfits Mad Lions is kind of a toss-up. Misfits have begun to show signs of life. Razork definitely seems to be the jungler to look out for when it comes to the rookies. Cadrill also told me the same, and after seeing his Gragas performance, I was very intrigued. Razork had a very rough first week, but he's coming to terms with what he wants to play, how he jungles, and Misfits is following in line. So I think Misfits is a very intriguing team, Mad Lions as well. I think it's a toss-up between sixth place, but I put Mad Lions just slightly above. Just slightly above. After that, we have SK. Still very little signs of life from SK, but I think Crownshot is playing super well, honestly. I think Crownshot is doing very well, and they seem to have an identity. So SK have an identity. They know how to, get themselves going, and then they have like, this team fight draft with Ornn, Brio, and so forth, and they are just trying to take games, which is fine, but this is not gonna be useful long term. Long term SK is going to accomplish very little, and I wouldn't be surprised if the teams below SK in the shape of Vitality and Schalke will overtake. So ninth place for me is Vitality. It could be 10th as well. Very little signs of life, but Vitality is plagued by visa issues. They lack identity. Always with the teams that lack identity, is usually like they don't have a pattern of how they actually break and win games. Vitality had some long games that went on forever, that ended in disaster, but Vitality really need to go back to the drawing board and find the recipe to their success, because I think Drafting Pantheon for Saken, drafting Yasuo for Saken is just not the way. This is just, you give him way too much agency. You need to put yourself in a position where the veteranship has more agency on the team. And if they can't pull through, then you are doomed. If Cabochard can't pull through, if Jacktroll can't pull through, then you are in a very, very rough spot. I think just putting Sakan in positions where he needs to play super, super well in order for you to win is very unfair. But I guess it comes from Sakan and Skin's synergy. Last place is Schalke. The reason I put them last place is because it's very hard to imagine that they will get out of their hole. With the jungle change, they could be above SK and Vitality. Honestly, I rate them all the same. Like if these teams face each other, it's just a coin flip. Schalke with the new jungler. Sometimes with a new jungler that can be enough to make everyone play better. The dynamic change, the communication change, the practice change. It is refreshing, and with that in mind, can be like a second win for the team. The jungler seems to have good results. I don't even remember his name now. Seems to have good results over in the German league, which is one of the most stacked regional leagues right now. Schalke no fear making changes. I think that's correct. I think Vitality's academy team is also being very successful. It's at the point where maybe you should sub in the whole academy team because they just look better at this point in time. I wouldn't be surprised if the information came out that Vitality's academy roster is beating them in scrims. Because if you head into next week and you end on 0-6, you've wasted a lot of time. And I feel bad for Sakan as well because he's playing both academy and LEC games. So he has a packed schedule, a super packed schedule. Schalke no fear, new jungler, maybe, maybe it's the future. Match of the week, G2 versus Fnatic. So I did the voiceover. It was pretty cool, honestly. It was pretty hype. I was proud to be a part of it. We initially filmed the longer version with me talking more. Not to sound biased, like I have the biggest ego on the planet, but I thought it was cooler when it was longer. And yeah, there's no way of saying that without sounding like a prick. Nevertheless, where was I? Match of the week. G2 versus Fnatic. I think G2 is going to win, but I think it's going to be very close. Especially in the nature of best of ones. I think Fnatic, if they get a lead, they really run away with it. I don't think G2 can be like cheeky and find their way back into the game against a team like Fnatic. I think Fnatic, when they get a lead, they are ruthless. And I think what will come down to is what do these teams have in store? What did they prepare specifically against each other draft-wise? Because usually that's the biggest difference maker here. G2 had a very good draft against OG. They stole away the least in the LeBlanc. Fnatic have very unique priors, and I am curious to see how both teams dissect the other. Because if with the way the wording has been around this matchup, it seems to me as if both teams really, really want it. And that might seem like the most obvious thing ever, but the reason I mention it is because this is the type of matchup where you save strategies. You save strategies for them. You think constantly, week in, week out. You have it in the back of your mind. You might be playing against Rogue, you might be playing against Vitality, but in the back of your mind, there's a part of this engine that is your mind that is working about, oh, G2, 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 right? It's like you might be reviewing, oh, this might be good against G2. This strategy might be good against G2. Oh, G2 are doing this. I'm sure the conversation in the hallways of Fnatic is constantly in regards to what is ahead of them, but the notion of beating G2 and facing G2 is always there, and I can assure you that G2 is experiencing the same. We had Grab saying that Origin is a meme, you know, that they are not to be appreciated as much as they're being appreciated. And I had the same notion, right? I said on the analyst desk that after week 2, like they used my clickbait bold prediction, or I said bold statement. OG looks like the best team right now, and this was after week 1, and they completely cut out the part that I said in week 1 OG looks like the strongest team, and this was with Mickey on the couch, and so it was really troll, but nevertheless, on analyst desk I said that Origin, they haven't been tested truly because they've never been in a position where their draft wasn't 15 times better than the enemy team. And against G2 we saw that. And Origin still showed a lot of strength, and I don't think they are getting carried by draft, but their issues were highlighted more. And I think the main one there is of course, what's his name? Destiny. So G2 Fnatic, I think I'm going to do the draft on that game. I'm going to talk about the draft. It is hype. It is very hype, because I think the draft is going to be the decider there. I think if both teams have created something clever to beat the enemy, I am really hyped about it. So let's leave it at that. I think G2 is going to win naturally. The rest of the matchups, first day we have Mad Lions versus SK, which is today. As I'm filming, I think Mad Lions is going to take it. They're just better than SK. Nothing surprising there. Schalke and Ulfir versus Misfits. Schalke have a new jungler, but I think Misfits are taking form, and I think the AD carry meta seems to be a bit of a struggle for Schalke. So I think Misfits have an edge. Fnatic versus XL. I think Fnatic is the better team. I predicted XL because honestly, for me, in order to win the best analyst thing, I need to have some predictions that go out of the norm. And for me, this is a decent bet because XL have been on the up and up, and maybe Fnatic are too focused on G2 or something like this. But if you're a betting man and you're betting money, then I would put on Fnatic, even though your odds are probably quite uninteresting because Fnatic is the clear favorite here. Origin versus Team Vitality. In the past this would be a hype matchup. Today it's not. Origin is going to win it. Rogue versus G2. I think Rogue is just not explosive enough to cause any harm to G2. Saturday, which is tomorrow, Schalke and Ulfir against SK. I think this is a coin flip. Honestly, just a coin flip. I think SK is going to take it, but maybe that prediction would change after the first day. So if you're betting money, I would bet on the second day and just check Schalke's performance against Misfits and then find the correlation in terms of how it could potentially translate into the next day. It is the biggest question mark here. XL Esports versus Team Vitality. I think XL Esports will win. Team Vitality, maybe if they can, I don't know, get like at least Camille going or something like this. Just, I don't know. It's hard to imagine a way where Team Vitality wins games right now. They need to give me something more. Mad Lions versus Rogue. I think Rogue is the better team. They're more solid, and I think maybe there's a world where Mad Lions can peak better, but I think we are far from that world. There's a lot of deaths happening. Kazi dying a lot, and everyone they're honing their powers right now. They're honing their powers. I think Rogue is the better team right now. Origin versus Misfits. I think Origin is the winner here, and then as we talked about the match of the week, G2 versus Fnatic. I think G2 will take it. I think G2 seem very focused. They seem very thorough in their approach, especially early on. I think in the first round robin, you can definitely trust G2, and then in the second round robin, I think that's the time when G2 will fuck around and drop some games. But I would be very happy as a fan of G2 to just see an 18-0 push, because I think they can definitely make it if they put the energy into it. But at the same time, from their perspective, how important is it? But if G2 went for something going 18-0, 18-0 two times, spring and summer, like this is the time to do it, because now they have an edge over the competition, and if they beat Fnatic, I think it's smooth sailing from there. Okay, we are approaching 1 hour. I think that's a neat bite size of YamatoCannon voice. I was thinking about, adding a segment where I read a passage from a book where you can use it to either fall asleep or something else. I was also considering, I wanted to ask you guys what you think about which guests we should bring on. I have in mind already for the first guest we've already discussed, and I don't want to reveal it yet because it's a bit of a secret. I wanted to tell you guys when it comes up. And then afterwards, I had in mind of talking to players, to personalities in general, just to get to know them. Not about any specific topic. I just wanted to have a conversation. Like I want the guest to satisfy a specific curiosity that I have, in the sense that I think good conversations come from curiosity. If I genuinely want to learn about someone or something, then everything, sorry, I just got a message and I lost my train of thought. I think a good conversation comes from curiosity, as I said, and if I genuinely want to learn something or get to know something, then everything will flow easier. I think when like prepared questions and agenda and so forth, I think there's a place for that and there's a necessity for that. I think Euphoria sets you up for that very, very well. But I want to do this for myself, you know. If this for some reason gets 0 views, if no one listened all the way to the end here, that's fine for me. I honestly don't mind. And the bottom line is, I just wanted to get going. I've been talking about the YamatoCannon experience for a long time. And for the love of God, I didn't take it from Jat. I took it from Joe Rogan, the same place he took it. Because Joe Rogan is the man. Joe Rogan is the boss. He's the podcast genius. And most of my ideas is from there. The fact that he's a genius, he's a genius in the sense that he gave so little shits about what he was doing. I remember the first episode of the Joe Rogan experience. It was just him with Brian Redban, and they were just on a laptop using the laptop webcam, smoking weed, talking smack, and they accidentally activated like a snowing filter, and they didn't know how to turn it off. So just the whole podcast, it was snowing. It was just snowing. So it's like you just have to get going. Still, I would appreciate your feedback. Help me find the intro song. Help me find an intro song that would mean a great deal to me. I really, really want to have an intro song that bounces. And the copyright thing is also tricky. I don't know how to bypass that. Maybe I'll have to buy a song. Maybe I'll go on Fiverr. Make me a podcast intro song. Or just do the whole radio thing, like with horns and everything, just obnoxious sounds. Jazz Radio FM, coming at you live from Berlin. No idea, man. No idea. I'm glad I'm over the food poisoning. We will see what the future brings. I'm excited. Finally, it's been announced that I'm on the LEC broadcast. You guys have seen me a couple of days. Going to work most likely 1 day a week for the time being. And then depending on my performance and the community feedback, I will get more work. It's a rough place, it's completely understandable, community feedback is very important, and this is a product. I don't mind competing in that sense for time. It's um, it's a natural way of doing things. If you're a player on a team, you compete with your substitutes and so forth. So I'm trying my best to become invaluable and to use this off season as much as possible, um, to be as busy as possible, and then eventually segue myself into to coaching again, or maybe continue full time as a podcaster and a LSE broadcast talent. It feels so obnoxious to call myself talent, but you guys get the gist of it. So community perception is very important. I'm doing Euphoria. Not sure how many episodes, but for the time being, I'm doing Euphoria. I love working with Dracos, man. He's a champ. He wrote the script for the intro, and he nailed it, man. Just betrayal. That was just the best. Just the best. What we could do, if you watch this long, what we could do is we could add a segment where I read something. I read something, I voice act something, and maybe it will satisfy all the ASMR needs for people. Because I get asked about ASMR all the time, and honestly, it's weird. I don't know how to deal with it. I really don't know how to deal with it. I think that's a good note to end it on. Give me your feedback. Give me your thoughts, and let's figure this out together. Peace. I do outro music.